folks, how's it going? Hope you're well. Hello, I'm Alistair. Some of you may have picked up on that from the subtle visual clues. I'm aware that we have people coming in from lots of different spots today. So, think of this as like coming into a cinema in the before times where you went to a cinema. There will be adverts, there will be trailers. You just got to get situated and get comfy. And instead of adverts and trailers, I'm going to read you something before I read you something else. The thing which I'm going to read you is a piece by a long-term friend of this parish, Nate Crowley. We've done a few of his things before. He's the reviews editor for Rock Paper Shotgun, and he has some opinions about the Halo Infinite Crisis Guerrilla. Before we dive into that, firstly, Magnus folks, welcome. Pseudopod and Escape Artists folks, welcome. York folks, welcome. Manx folks, welcome. New folks who may have come here via Conzealand or Conzealand Fringe, which may come up in conversation in about 10 minutes. Welcome. Hi, everybody. Please get comfy, get situated, get some water, get a snack, take any meds you need, and let me have Nate tell you about the biggest mood in video games right now. I'm sorry, I'm obsessed with the Halo Infinite Crisis Guerrilla. The Biggest of Moods by Nate Crowley. Escarum has set a fire in my heart. There were plenty of tidbits to be gleaned from last night's Halo Infinite campaign footage, but the star of the show for me was the incredibly aggravated gorilla who came out of nowhere to deliver a passionate monologue to camera, right at the end. Admittedly, this sounds exactly like something I would invent in a joke post about a fictional Halo demo, but it was quite real, and having slept on it, I'm all the more delighted by it. But it's not just this hulking beast that Big John Halo might be facing in Infinite. Having attended a developer presentation about the game last night, I can report that Halo Infinite might also feature the Flood as an adversary. It's a big might, admittedly, as when I asked narrative lead Paul Crocker whether our old parasitic mates would be making a reappearance, he kept his cards so close to his chest I'm surprised he didn't cough up the ace of diamonds. What I can guarantee, he answered, is that you're going to make some new friends. Not much to go with, alas, but going with the smile he was trying to suppress as he said it, I'm giving it 60-40 odds in favour of everyone's favourite disaster squids making a return. But all in all, Crockett was more interested in talking about Escarum, which is fine, because I am too. Revealing new characters for big-budget action games can be challenging when you've only got a few lines of dialogue to make an impression in a relatively short gameplay reveal, especially when you're revealing a new major antagonist in a blockbuster FPS franchise like Halo. By and large, the baddie for Halo Infinite needed to be an imposing, violent alien with a personal vendetta against Big John Halo, or at the very least humans in general, as anything else would have upset the proverbial apple cart. When you're as massive and successful as Halo, there are certain things fans expect. And so, in Escarum, we get an imposing, violent alien with a personal vendetta against Big John Halo. He could have been the dullest, most generic war bastard going, arguably much like Tartarus from Halo 2. But he was not. Escarum was weird, strangely likeable, genuinely compelling, and all I want to endure is more monologues from him and find out his general deal. I was thinking about what he said in the trailer again this morning, and found he kept occupying the spaces in my head where I normally get distracted by aquarium plants and my crab tanks. Sure, part of the reason for that is that Escarum's voiced by Darren Reinhardt DePaul, who is one of the best voice actors out there for OTT bombastic charisma, but also because the script he was working with had worked in a host of tiny details to elevate the world's most intense gorilla above the generic. For a start, there's the fact that he seems to like you. There's no doubt that Escarum wanted to murder the shit out of you, but the whole of his short monologue is underlaid with a sort of incredibly aggressive affection, not the false bonhomie of a supervillain welcoming the hero to their lair with an evil laugh, but the excitement of someone meeting their hero who they also hate with every fibre of their being. It's a complicated, dissonant mindset, convincingly alien in a way, but there's no doubt about it, as Escarum implores Chief to bare his fangs, in a line delivered with chilling intensity by DePaul and mildly under-caffeinated intensity by me. It feels every bit like motivation rather than intimidation. This guy wants you to give him the very best you've got and enjoy the battle to the death every bit as much as he intends to. The second thing I love about Escarim's monologue is the suggestion that underneath all of this berserk fixation on fighting you, he is just incredibly depressed. Apparently, Infinite's story starts some months after humanity's defeat at the hands of Escarim's banished faction, and it seems that you've stumbled upon him in a moment of post-anticlimactic soul-searching. He's old, by the look of things, and feeling like he's at the end of his career as a big alien battle gorilla. Before his final challenge, he looks off to the side for a bit and admits that when the fight was done, he felt weary, lost, alone. It's Alexander the Great having a bit of a cry because there's nothing left to conquer by way of London Zoo. You actually feel a bit sorry for him, and clearly he never imagined in his wildest dreams that only the most accomplished fight man in the galaxy would proceed to show up right on his doorstep looking for a scrap. So when he turns to face you after his moment of reflection and inexplicably steps out of the hologram he's been speaking from to get right in your face, the look of motion-captured joy on his face is as thoroughly pure as it is terrifyingly bloodthirsty. In deciding to kill him, you've just given this knackered old bruiser a reason to live. This is my last fight, he confesses, before going on to shout with what feels like genuine relief that our story will outlive us both. All these less beast mode emotions are buried under macho hollering, but they are unmistakable. Escarim has clearly been consumed for some time with the fear of dying as a footnote in history, but now, whether he wins the fight or you do, you've saved him from irrelevance. In fact, he probably assumes that the chief feels the same way, so much so that "set a fire in your heart, Spartan" comes out more rapturous than it does threatening. It's hard not to find him likeable in that moment, and given the outlandishly close distance from which that whole final section is filmed, it utterly nails you to your chair. We're used to writers trying to make us care about their protagonists, but trying to solicit pathos for a villain, especially one so unambiguously menacing as this, is a lot more impressive. Is it silly to care this much about a speech from a ridiculous alien baddie in a Halo game? Nah, it's not. This is space opera, remember? It's called that for a reason. Space opera stories are stories told in all caps, with emotions too big to fit into ordinary people or places, and wringing maximum passion from the ostensibly ridiculous is what it's all about. Sure, the plot of the Halo games is total spaghetti in places and often doesn't make sense, but then it doesn't make sense in regular opera when people sing at deafening volume instead of having conversations, does it? It's a genre where you have to commit absolutely everything to the bit, without apology, or else produce something dull, forgettable, and cheesy. It's not even like I'm really invested in the Halo lore. It's fine as Halo goes, but it only really works for me when I'm tearing through the middle of it in a car named after a pig, while a load of monks sing my theme tune and I've got scant mental space left to think about the details. I go so far as to argue that high pulp, like Halo, a phrase I use very much as praise, is less concerned with generating a coherent, tidy plot than it is with generating a sense of mood. And when it comes to moods, an 8-foot-tall, chronically insecure gorilla having a gigantic mental breakdown 3 inches from your face is about as big as they come. Flood or no flood, sprint or no sprint, local co-op play or not, I'm sold. Hello everybody, how are you doing? That was what was happening in Nate's brain today. So, it's been a quiet week.
Really?
oh, my sweet summer children. We attended 2 conventions simultaneously. Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
we're extra.
So I work with a couple of people as a consultant, basically. I'm a professional sounding board, and one of them is Claire Russo, who is a fantastic booktuber and was in fact the first ever booktuber to be a Hugo finalist. And Claire, at the top of last week, basically emailed me for a chat and went, "I've got an idea. I want to do some low-level convention programming, like asynchronous to Worldcon, but I don't want to annoy Worldcon with it. And because it's me, and I never assume that things that people say are things which are going to happen in this kind of space, I was like, oh, so you mean like UK-US time zone friendly yet temporarily asynchronous programming? And there was the sound of her frantically writing stuff down. And I genuinely have no memory of any work I did across the next couple of days. I returned to consciousness, some would say, 2 days after that fact, typing up a panel description whilst Marguerite was pulling a code of conduct out of thin air. And yeah, we made a convention, and it was really good. Conceal Fringe was just 16 panels across 5 days, all streamed on YouTube, all for free, all available forever. And we were very specifically designed to basically make folks who couldn't make the trip out to New Zealand or who weren't naturally in those time zones anyway feel a little bit more like they were going to the convention. And it went brilliantly. It went so brilliantly that we had people complain that they weren't invited when we were just frantically trying to pull this together from people we could reach immediately.
Alistair blacked out and organized a con. Yeah, that's kind of what the last several days have been about.
I blacked out and assisted in organising a con.
Fair.
But no, it went brilliantly. It went sufficiently brilliantly that we have the debrief at the end of this week, and we are trying to work out what to do with this thing, because if you...
You have to be careful. If you do something in genre twice in a row, it becomes ironclad tradition.
But we've always done that. This is the second time. Exactly, And we don't want that, because we spent a lot of last year trying to break free from a long-standing fan tradition show, which we'd always worked, despite the fact that nothing ever actually went right with it. So we're looking at a couple of options. We're looking at the possibility of basically turning this into... Oh, Magpie, that's really big of you. Thank you. Just knowing the Fringe was there made both feel more welcoming. No, thank you. Into a kit, into a toolbox. So basically you can go, I need to run a geographically disparate convention, and we go, con in a box. And then you just have all the stuff you need, and you can do it. We're probably not done with it. We've already had a couple of inquiries from other shows, and if...
We've already had other cons make reference to supporting the idea of fringes being run at the same time.
Mm-hmm. The other thing which I'm acutely aware of, because we had a couple of people from Dublin, from the Dublin Worldcon, get pretty snippy at us about this, because they had a fringe as well, was this is not an original idea, but the way which Claire developed it is... And it is extraordinarily mobile and extraordinarily versatile. And that's something which we can just provably push out into the horrible toxic cesspit of fandom and turn it into a life raft.
Condo starter, as opposed to sourdough starter.
Yes! Very cool. I love it. So yeah, Conceal and Fringe went really well, and then Concealant happened. And anyway, it's time for this week's story. And
hey now. Nice
oh my god. Oh my actual god. Okay, so the Hugo Awards ceremony. Well, we can...
Let's try and do this light touch, shall we?
Yeah. In my limited experience, award ceremonies tend to work best when they are 2 hours or under. About 3 years ago, the show was held in San Jose in California, and a fantastic artist called John Picacio, who is basically Admiral Adama, was the master of ceremonies. And literally the first thing that happened was that John came out on stage and went, all right, I know you all want to get drunk. This is really stressful. I'm not going to muck about. We're going to be done in 90 minutes, people. Set your watches and launch the Alert Vipers. It's possible, I imagine, that last piece. But he was good to his word. 90 minutes later, we were out of there. It was amazing. 90 minutes into this year's show, George had handed out 2.5 awards.
And there are approximately 20 to be handed out in the night.
I'm not saying the sweet release of death was being begged for, but there were certainly some very courteous letters being written to it. It was, to quote Alec Hardison, very awful in every conceivable way. For some reason, he had recorded sections, and at the end of the recorded section, he would throw to a live section, which is fine if you're throwing to someone else. He wasn't. He was throwing to him. It was like that he had written a list of people he really wanted to annoy the piss out of. And he got a tick in every single box. Every single, as near as I could tell, non-European name was mispronounced. About 1 in 2 European names were mispronounced. He mispronounced Mer. And I know she's in the chat. And I'm so sorry, buddy. He mispronounced Mer. He mispronounced the magazine Fire. He mispronounced the name of every single one of their staff. He looked visibly annoyed at having to say unusual names. And this is even before we get to the fact that he brought up John W. Campbell. Here's literally the one thing you need to know about John W. Campbell if you don't know about him. Racist as hell and dead. Seriously, that's it. And he insisted on bringing up Campbell as a paragon of all that is great in science fiction. And then notably failed to mention the fact that the Campbell Award had been renamed last year. And in fact, the acceptance speech by the lady who was one of the catalysts for getting it renamed last year won a Hugo this year. And he looked like a bulldog with a bee sting on its ass. It was, oh my goodness me. To give you an example of just how completely worthless this thing was, this was a 3.5 hour show. And as Marguerite has just said in the chat, George talked for 2 straight hours. Someone has actually done a supercut of it and removed all...
I put a link in the chat.
Great. The 1 hour 30 version, which is just the winners giving these amazingly brave and fierce acceptance speeches, is brilliant. Please pretend that happened instead of what we had to sit through. I know I am. And, of course, eventually, as all things do, this ended, and... then we went to bed just before daylight.
Yeah, it was like 4:45.
I have never John Wooed into bed before. Seriously, but we did. It was like, okay, time for bed. Oh my God, that's twilight. And at 5 a.m., that can only mean one thing. And we are both people who, if we're still awake when the sun comes up, we're awake for the next 15 hours. So we just kind of leapt sideways into bed and took herbal sleeping drugs and passed out for 6 hours. And of course he's apologised, and of course he's done so in a way which literally included the phrase, well, lots of people said I was funny. How many of them were you related to? How many of them are you employed by? And it's come out that the reason why he mispronounced the names was he realised there were 125 names. The convention didn't pass him any of the pronunciation material that they asked us for, and he only had 6 emails. And he was tired, you guys. I mean, he has so much money. He has to count it all the time. He has to backstroke up and down in a big vat of coins like Scrooge McDuck. And that takes a lot out of a guy.
Have a sip of tea, babe. I can hear you angrily drinking tea.
And now, you have discovered one of my other superpowers. The very rare occasions when I'm angry, I can drink furiously. All of this was awful in every conceivable way, and it was one of those unique instances wherein ultimately context doesn't matter, or truth doesn't matter, perception does. He sounded incredibly racist. He sounded incredibly transphobic. He sounded incredibly sexist. One of the hills I'm choosing to hulk out on is the fact that in the introduction to Best Semi-Proscene, he literally said, semi-proscenes are people who don't quite pay enough. Or to put it another way, a multi-millionaire streaming live from the cinema he'd just bought told me and Marguerite that we don't pay our authors and staff enough. The red mist isn't quite descending, but everything has a certain ochre tone to it right now. Anyway, it finished. He apologised. The con apologised. There's now been a whole string of other things which it's come out that the con just abjectly failed to do. Like, remember, they were in New Zealand. Seriously, there was about a 3-minute video about the production of the Hugo Award basis, because they're different every year, and they liked that so much they repeated it in the middle of the award ceremony. Or perhaps that was just to stop George talking. And that was literally the only stuff there was about New Zealand culture. It was a horrible, horrible train wreck of a show, culminating in a horrible, horrible, horrible train wreck of a show. And the only good thing that has come out of this is there is just universal horror at this.
The way we got through it involved snacks and alcohol and having private Discord channels where we could talk to other people who were going through the same thing.
The amount of people on private Discord channels going, what the hell is this? At that particular time could have powered the sun.
Celia's made a very good point there as well.
They didn't even let people know we were eligible to vote for the... Yes.
So the Vogel. Tell people about the Vogels, yeah.
The Sir Julius Vogel Awards are the New Zealand Hugos. They are the #1 honour for speculative fiction. when you have attending status at a Worldcon, which is, it sounds really posh, I know, but it's literally just you must pay us this much money to be able to come. You also have voting rights in the Hugos. This year, we apparently also had voting rights in the Sir Julius Vogel Awards. We were told this once in a tweet that was released at 5:36 a.m. in May. Yeah. And
needless to say, the local New Zealand organizers who had been working on this bid and project for nearly a decade were very, very, very not happy.
Yes, and the two big take homes from this, and this is the weird thing: the show was universally awful. Last year in Dublin, it was just crap for about 100 people that George couldn't be bothered to let into a party. Hi was one of them. So was Marguerite. This year, everyone saw this happen to everybody for 3.5 hours. And folks who last year were going, well, George is fine. He does an awful lot for the community, especially from here in 1951. Are now going, what? You know?
Yeah, most of what George does is write a check. And these days, I don't think we even want his money.
Exactly. So this means, hopefully for the next couple of years at least, things will be very, very different. And putting aside all the personal stuff and putting aside all the jokes, the simple truth is that Hugo finalists for the last couple of years have been, incoming swear, treated like shit. And that's been me for a couple of years. And the first time, it was one of the things that made me very unwell for 6 months. This time, I saw it coming. It won't happen again.
Yeah.
And my sincere hope is that there is a major attitudinal shift coming, both in the way this show is run and the way this show handles celebrities, which will mean that no one has to go through what finalists have been through for the last couple of years.
I'm just going to stop holding my breath. We've proven that we can run a run cons now, so there we go.
It should be pointed out. A friend of ours, Andrew Reed, who has a fantastic book called The Hunter, which is on 99p on Kindle at the moment.
Oh, let me get a link to that.
I just did the finger guns, I'm so sorry.
It's okay, it's a really good book, I love it.
Okay, cool. He keeps sending us clips from Field of Dreams with whispers, do an EA con. If you build it, they will come. And yeah, we're ignoring him. It's going really badly. The link will shortly be in the chat. So yeah, that was our week. And then the cons stopped happening and we suddenly realised that we had a couple of amazing new friends from New Zealand who were really badass. And that also leads to the other thing, which is actually a massive positive. Worldcon has failed New Zealand speculative fiction so epically that an entire generation of specfic writers and journalists on Twitter have all gone, not on my watch. And you're seeing so many people signal boost New Zealand publishers and writers. One of the ladies who worked with us on Fringe, Cassie Hart, is a guest at FireCon in a few weeks. Fire also have come out of this brilliantly because they were incredibly disrespected by the rich old white man. And, you know, folks have been buying memberships for FireCon to help disadvantaged people get there. And they've got these amazing guests laid in, and we've been sponsoring some stuff over there. And we really, as Marguerite said, are at the point where we're done waiting. The generation that has sat on top of this show for far, far too long don't want us here. So we'll go somewhere else. And where we go, the somewhere else we go will be cooler because we'll build it ourselves. And then like FireCon, which we'll also put the link in the show notes.
Which has, which has just announced its guests of some of its guests of honor today.
Rebecca Roanhorse.
Rebecca Roanhorse.
Cassie
Hart, who was one of the New Zealand organizers that we worked with.
And intriguingly,
I don't have his name to hand. The guy from Saudi Arabia who helped organize a Worldcon bid
in Jeddah, which caused some problems.
Yeah, there was a lot of discussion about
so
that.
It's going to be really interesting to see how this goes. Yeah, I'm curious to see how all of this shakes out. Anyway, that's been the week. Now, let's talk about this week's story, because we're about to start something new.
No, you can't do that.
Why not? Oh yeah, of course.
be very upset if you.
Are we alright in signal, by the way? Because I'm parked on red over here.
Everything seems okay. Why don't you ask in the chat if the signal's coming across all right?
Fear, indeed. Folks, how's the audio and video looking? We doing okay? Also,
Show how tall he is right now. He got fed. You can always tell. There's been a little bit of buffering going on, but I'm not sure if that's us or if it's just the fact that, it's late in the day. Put your phone on airport mode if it isn't already.
It is.
Okay.
And the iPad isn't. The iPad's on Wi-Fi. So.
Okay, let's see if that helps a little bit.
Oh, hey, look.
What?
On green.
Oh, so you forgot to put your iPad on airport mode, is what you're saying.
So now would be a really good time to tell you a funny story. One of our colleagues in Escape Artists is a lady called Primi Mohammed. Primi wrote an amazing book called Beneath the Rising, which is her debut, and I've reviewed it and I've interviewed her about it on my newsletter, The Full Lid. And Primi he does not have a hat yet. We are working on it, Wendy, I promise. Primi is a chemical engineer and binds science with her strange wisdoms, I think is the best way to describe her. And she had a colleague she's Canadian, she lives in Canada.
Thank you, honey.
And she has a colleague who was part of a field team who went out to look at some pylons or some sciencey whatnot. And they were totes profesh. And and they were pursued for a full day by a bear. Like, literally full on antagonist exit stage left, pursued by a bear. This grizzly bear trundling happily through the forest behind them going, would you slow down? I'm going to eat you. And they got somewhere relatively safe and went, so have we got anything which will attract them? No. Okay, moved on, sorted evacuation, all of this stuff. And then the third or fourth time they started, went, okay, one last time. He shouldn't be following us like this. What's going on? Doug, her colleague, apparently reached into his jacket and went, well, I do have this meatball sub. Do you think that had anything to do with it? They don't let him out anymore.
He's not allowed to do field work anymore?
He's not allowed to do field work for that reason. Anyway, you have seen Chungus. You have seen Chungus Jr. Thank you so much to Purple Almonds for the photo, and I'm delighted to see that the Chungus is spreading.
And Purple Almond's gorgeous kitchen, which I am only slightly jealous of, honest.
Yes, me too. And we are going to move on to start off our new story. This month, for you, we are doing A Wizard's Guide to Defensive Baking by T. Kingfisher. T. Kingfisher is also known as Ursula K. Vernon. Ursula is a friend of ours and a just ridiculously prolific author whose husband has just acquired several new kittens. They are deeply lovely, profoundly odd people, and this is a deeply lovely and profoundly odd story, which I promise you is nothing of the sort like Search and Rescue. This is a very definite plan from us to, ensure that you have something perhaps a little nicer to play with after the last few weeks. I see some people in the chat are aware of the magic of Kevin, the world's most metal Disney princess. This pleases me immensely.
He is a biker Disney princess. That is how you describe Kevin. He is, if you've ever seen old school...
Tom and Jerry.
No, is it Tom and Jerry?
With the big bulldog.
So it is Mark Antony is the name of the big bulldog, and Pussyfoot is the name of the kitten. That is Kevin. And there's even fan art of Kevin as Mark Antony with a little Pussyfoot kitten. It's adorable.
Happy birthday for yesterday, Haven. I'm so glad you spent the day with your kitten chasing balloons around the room. That sounds amazing.
I'm so jealous. Honey, we need pets.
We really do. All stories are true. All of them. Especially this one. So, real quick, get comfy. Get some water. Eat a food. Take some drugs that you need if you need to take some drugs.
Check down on pets and such.
Check in on pets and such. I can assure you the bedroom door is closed, so there will be no Suave Catboy Lumberjack hours here tonight. Thank you. And we'll kick off.
messed up your place in the book, haven't I? Because I was reading ahead.
That's why I'm reading on a different device. Checkmate. A Wizard's Guide to Defensive Baking by T. Kingfisher. There was a dead girl in my aunt's bakery. I let out an undignified yelp and backed up a step and then another until I ran into the bakery door. We keep the door open most of the time because the big ovens get swelteringly hot otherwise, but it was 4 a.m. and nothing was warmed up yet. I could tell right away that she was dead. I haven't seen a lot of dead bodies in my life. I'm only 14. Baking's not exactly a high mortality profession. But the red stuff oozing out from under her head definitely wasn't raspberry filling. And she was lying at an awkward angle that nobody would choose to sleep in, even assuming they'd break into a bakery to take a nap in the first place. My stomach made an awful clenching, like somebody had grabbed it and squeezed it hard, and I clapped both hands over my mouth to keep from getting sick. There was already enough of a mess to clean up without adding my second-hand breakfast to it. The worst thing I've ever seen in the kitchen was the occasional rat. Don't judge us, you can't keep rats out in this city, and we're as clean an establishment as you'll ever find. And the zombie frog. The one that crawled out of the canals. Poor thing had been downstream of the cathedral, and sometimes they dumped the holy water a little recklessly. And, well, you get a plague of undead frogs and newts and whatnot. The crawfish are the worst. You can get the frogs with a broom, but you have to call in a priest for a zombie crawfish. But I would have preferred any number of zombie frogs to a corpse. I have to get Aunt Tabitha. She'll know what to do. Not that Aunt Tabitha had bodies in her bakery on a regular basis, but she's one of those competent people who always knows what to do. If a herd of ravenous centaurs descended on the city and went galloping through the streets, devouring small children and cats, Aunt Tabitha would calmly go about setting up barricades and manning crossbows as if she did it twice a week. Unfortunately, to get to the hallway that led to the stairs up to Aunt Tabitha's bedroom, I would have to walk the length of the kitchen, and that meant walking past the corpse. Stepping over it, in fact. Okay. Feet. You with me? Knees? Can we do this? The feet and knees reported their willingness. The stomach was not happy with this plan at all. I wrapped one hand around my waist, climbed the other firmly over my mouth in case it decided to rebel. Okay, here we go. I inched into the kitchen. I spent 6 days a week here, sometimes 7, running back and forth across the tile, flinging dough onto counters and pans into ovens. I crossed the kitchen floor hundreds of times a day without even thinking about it. Now, it seemed to be about a mile long, an unfamiliar and a hostile landscape. I had a dilemma. I didn't want to look at the body, but if I didn't, I might step on her, and that just didn't bear thinking about. No help for it. I looked down. The dead girl's legs were splayed across the floor. She was wearing grimy boots with mismatched socks, and that seemed really sad. I mean, it was sad that she was dead anyway, probably, unless she'd been a horrible person, but dying with mismatched socks seemed especially sad somehow. I imagined her throwing the socks on, never thinking that a few hours later an apprentice baker and half-baked wizard of dough would be tiptoeing past her and thinking about the condition of her footwear. There was probably a moral there somewhere, but I'm not a priest. Thought about becoming one once, but they don't really like wizards, even minor wizards, whose only talents are making bread rise and keeping the pastry dough from sticking together. Right about the time I gave up on the hopes of joining the priesthood, Aunt Tabitha had taken me on in the bakery, and the siren song of flour and shortening pretty much sealed my fate. I wondered what had sealed this poor girl's fate. Her hair was mostly over her face, so it was hard to tell how old she was. And I wasn't looking very closely, but I got the feeling she was young, maybe not much older than me. How did she wind up dead in our bakery? Somebody who was cold or hungry might conceivably creep into the bakery. It's warm, even at night, since we bank the big stoves, but we don't put them out. There's always food around, even just the day-old stuff in the case. But that didn't explain why she was dead. I could see one of her eyes. It was open. I looked away again. Maybe she slipped and hit her head. Aunt Tabitha always swears I'll break my neck one of these days, the way I race around the kitchen like a flower-crazed greyhound. But it seems weird that you'd break into a bakery and then run around inside it. Maybe she was murdered, whispered a traitorous little voice in my brain. Shut up! Shut up! That's just stupid, I told it. People hold murders in back alleys and things, not my aunt's kitchen. And it'd be stupid to leave a body in a bakery. The whole city is built on canals. There are 50 bridges to a street, and the basements flood every spring. Who'd dump a body in a bakery where you could dump it in a perfectly good canal, not 20 feet from the door? I held my breath and stepped over the dead girl's ankles. Nothing happened. I wasn't expecting anything to happen, but I was still relieved. I looked straight ahead, took 2 more careful steps, then broke into a run. I knocked the door open with my shoulder and tore up the stairs yelling, Aunt Tabitha! Come quick! It was 4 in the morning, but bakers are used to getting up at 4 in the morning, and the only reason that Aunt Tabitha was sleeping until the decadent hour of 6:30 was because her niece had been finally trusted to open the bakery in the last few months. That's me, in case you aren't following along. She'd been nervous about letting me take over, and I'd been really proud that nothing had gone wrong when I was opening. This made me feel twice as guilty that a dead body had turned up on my watch, even though it wasn't my fault. I mean, it's not like I had killed her. Don't be stupid. Nobody killed her. She just slipped. Probably. Aunt Tabitha! Gracious, Mona, muttered my aunt from behind the door. Is the building on fire? No, Aunt Tabitha, I have discovered a dead body in our kitchen, was what I meant to say. What came out was something more along the lines of, Aunt Body, there's a Tabitha, the kitchen, dead, she's dead, I come quick, she's dead. The door at the top of the stairs was flung open, and my aunt emerged shouldering into her house dress. Her house dress is large. Her house dress is pink. Her house dress has winged croissants embroidered across it. It is quite hideous. Aunt Tabitha herself is large and pink, but doesn't have winged croissants flying across her, except when she is wearing her house dress. Dead, she narrowed her eyes down at me. Who's dead? The body in the kitchen. In my kitchen? Aunt Tabitha came barreling down the stairs at top speed, and not wanting to be trampled, I retreated in front of her. She brushed me aside, not unkindly, and went sideways through the door to the bakery. I followed, poking my head timidly round the doorframe, and waiting for the explosion. Ah, Aunt Tabitha put a fist on each generous hip. That's a dead body, all right. Lord save us. There was a long silence. I stared at her back, and she stared at the dead girl, and the dead girl stared at the ceiling. Aunt Tabitha, what should we do? I finally asked. Aunt Tabitha shook herself. Well, I'll go wake your uncle up and send him round to the constables. You start lighting the fires and put a tray of sweet buns on. Sweet buns? We're going to bake. We're a bakery girl, my aunt snapped. Besides, never knew a copper who didn't love a sweet bun, and we'll be swarming with them before long. Better put on 2 trays. There's a dear. I drew myself together. Should I start the rest of the baking, then? My aunt frowned and tugged at her lower lip. No, I don't think so. They'll be in and out and making a mess of things for a few hours at least. We'll just have to open later, I suppose. She turned and stalked heavily away to rouse my uncle. I was left alone with the dead girl and the ovens. I could get to one of the ovens easily enough, and I poked up the fire underneath and threw another log on. There's this trick to keeping the ovens heated evenly, and it's the first thing you learn. If you have spots that are too hot or too cold, your bread gets full in spots and comes out lumpy and looking sort of squashed in places. I couldn't reach the other oven without stepping over her. After a moment's thought, I threw one of our dish towels over her face. It was easier, somehow, if I couldn't see that one eye staring upward at nothing. I fired up the other oven. Sweet buns are easy. I could make sweet buns in my sleep, and occasionally at 4 in the morning, I pretty much do. I threw the dry ingredients together in a bowl and started whisking them together. I gazed up at the rafters so that I didn't have any chance of seeing the body. There was a brief shine of eyes as a mouse looked down at me, then scurried across the rafters on his way back to his mouse hole. By the way, having mice is actually a good thing, since it means we don't have rats anymore. Rats think mice are yummy. There were eggs on the counter and a big crockery jar of shortening in the corner. I cracked the eggs, separated out the yolks, perfectly, I might add, and dumped all the ingredients into a bigger bowl and started beating. I heard the front door open. I heard the front door close. Uncle Albert went out to get the constable. Aunt Tabitha was bustling around the front of the shop, probably getting ready to turn the first wave of customers away. I wondered how many constables we'd get. A couple, right? For a murder. Murders are important. Oh, would the body wagon come? Well, it'd have to, wouldn't it? We couldn't very well just set the body out with the garbage. The wagon would come, and then all the neighbours would think my uncle had died. Nobody would think Tabitha had died, of course. She was a force of nature. And they'd come around gossiping, and they'd find out there had been a murder, and... Wait, when did I decide it was a murder? She just slipped. I discovered that between not looking at the dead girl and wondering about constables that I had been kneading the sweet bun dough for much too long. Here's the thing. You don't want to knead them too much or it makes them tough. I stuck a floury hand in the dough and suggested that maybe it didn't want to be so tough. There was a sort of fizziness around my fingers and the dough went a little stickier. Now, dough is really amicable to persuasion if you know how to ask it right. Sometimes I forget that other people can't. I separated out a dozen evenly sized lumps of raw dough and set them on the wooden baking panel. Then shoved them into the oven with strict orders that they didn't want to burn. They wouldn't. Not burning is one of the few magics I'm really good at. Once, when I was having a really awful day, I did it too hard, and half the bread didn't bake at all.
Jax, I'm sorry. Jax is just putting the two... Did Marguerite write this?
Did Marguerite write this?
I wish I wrote this well. Oh, sorry to interrupt.
That was the sweet buns done. I wiped my hands on my apron and dipped a cup of flour out of one of the bins. There was one other task that had to be done, no matter what, whether there was one body in the kitchen or a dozen. The steps down to the basement are slippery because everybody's basements leak. It's amazing we still have them. My father, who was a builder before he died, used to say that it was because there was another city down there and people just kept on building upwards as the canals rose, so the basement floors were really the roofs and ceilings of old houses. In the darkest, warmest corner of the basement, a bucket bubbled slowly. Every now and then, one of the bubbles would pop and exhale a damp, yeasty aroma. "Come on, Bob," I said, using the sugary tones you'd use to approach an unpredictable animal. "Come on. Got some nice flour for you." Bob popped several bubbles, which is Bob's version of an enthusiastic greeting. Bob is my sourdough starter. He's the first big magic I ever did, and I didn't know what I was doing, so I overdid it. A sourdough starter is kind of a gloppy mess of all the yeast and weird little growing things that you need to make bread rise. The taste of the bread can change a lot depending on the starter. Most of them live for a couple of weeks, but in the right hands they can stay alive for years. There's one in Constantine that's supposed to be over a century old. Now, when I first started working in my aunt's bakery, I was just 10, and I was so scared that I would screw something up. My magic did weird things to recipes sometimes. So, I was put in charge of tending her sourdough starter, which she'd been using since she started the bakery, and which was really important because Aunt Tabitha's bread was famous. And I don't know if I gave it too much flour or too much water, or not enough of either, but it dried up and it nearly died. And when I found that out, I was so scared that I stuck both hands into it, and it was pretty icky, let me tell you, and ordered it not to die, to live. I told it, come on, don't die on me, live, grow, eat, please don't dry up. Well, I was 10, and I was really scared. And sometimes being scared does weird things to the magic. Supercharges it, for one thing. The starter didn't die. It grew. A lot. It foamed out of the jar and over my hands, and I started yelling for Aunt Tabitha, but by the time she got there, the starter had reached the sack of flour I'd been using to feed it and ate the whole thing. I started crying, but Aunt Tabitha just put her hands on her hips and said, "It's still alive, it'll be fine," and scraped it into a much bigger jar, and that was the beginning of Bob. I'm not actually sure if we could kill him anymore. One time the city froze so hard nobody could go anywhere, and Aunt Tabitha was stuck across town for 3 days, and I couldn't get down the block, and nobody fed Bob. I expected to come back and find him frozen, or starved, or something. Instead, the bucket had moved across the basement, and there were the remains of a couple of rats scattered around. He hadn't eaten the bones. That was how we figured out that Bob could feed himself. I'm still not sure how he moves. Like a slime mold, maybe. I'm not going to pick the bucket up and find out. I doubt there's a bottom on it anymore, and I don't want to risk annoying Bob. He likes me best, because I feed him the most often. He tolerates Aunt Tabitha. My uncle won't go into the basement anymore. He claims Bob actually hissed at him once. Would have been kind of a belching hiss, I imagine. I dumped the flour in on top of Bob, and he glubbed happily in his bucket and extended a sort of mushy tentacle. I pulled it off, and the starter settled back and began digesting the flour. He doesn't seem to mind me taking bits to make bread, and it's still the best sourdough in town. We just don't tell anybody about the eating rats thing. Chapter 2. Constable Alphonse was tall and broad and red-faced. He came into the kitchen, stopped, and said, sounding surprised, "There's a dead body in here." "That's what I told you," said Uncle Albert behind him, sounding aggrieved. "Well, yeah, but..." The constable trailed off, but still made it abundantly clear that he'd expected a hysterical member of the public to be getting upset about nothing, not that there would be a genuine dead body in a respectable bakery. Aunt Tabitha took charge. "It's a dead body, all right. Mona found it this morning when she came in. Have a sweet bun." Constable Alphonse took a sweet bun, chewed, and decided to go for a second opinion. Constable Montgomery was also tall, also broad, but instead of being red-faced, was rather sallow. He ate 3 sweet buns, confirmed that yes, indeed, it was a dead body, and then he and Alphonse stood in the kitchen in silence until Aunt Tabitha testily suggested that maybe they should call for the body wagon. "We'll need the coroner," said Montgomery, and helped himself to another sweet bun. "Coroner, yeah," agreed Alphonse. They went out. "Better put in another tray of sweet buns," said Aunt Tabitha, "and a pot of tea, I think. Looks like we'll be all morning about this." The coroner, when he arrived, was a short man, bald and slabby, like a half-melted candle. He ate most of a tray of sweet buns by himself, but I didn't get to hear what he said, because once they started moving the body, Aunt Tabitha shooed me out to the front of the store to take care of customers. Most of the customers are regulars, and they have regular orders, and while they were disappointed that their muffins and breads and scones weren't available, they were more worried that something was wrong. I repeated over and over again that everything was fine, somebody had just broken into the kitchen and the police were looking into it, but nothing seemed to have been stolen, and we were hoping to be open for business later today. "Nobody's safe anymore," said old Mrs. Mugrammer, 1 lemon scone, no icing, with a sniff. She rapped a cane against the counter for emphasis. "Imagine! Someone's breaking into a bakery. We'll all be murdered in our beds soon, and no mistake." some of us sooner than others, muttered Mr. Elwich, the foot carpenter, 2 cinnamon rolls, 1 loaf of cheese bread, winking at me. Humph! Miss McGrammer shook her cane at him. You can laugh, wee Sidney, the boy of Mrs. Weatherford, who does the washing. He went missing just last week. Never seen hide nor hair of him since. No, I ventured. They have not. She smacked her cane down like a judge's gavel. Probably ran away to sea, offered Brutus the chandler. 1 of whatever looks good today, my dear, and a loaf of the day old for the pigeons if you have it. Ran away to sea? Asked Miss McGrammer, scandalised. Elwich put a hand over his mouth to stifle a smile. Sidney? Nothing doing. He was a good boy, he was. Even good boys will be boys, said Brutus mildly, rubbing his forearms. He had several faded tattoos, and I suspect he was speaking from personal experience. Sidney Weatherford wouldn't run away to sea, piped up the tiny Widow Holloway. 1 blackberry muffin, 2 ginger cookies, and thank you so much, dear Mona. You're getting to look more like your poor dear mother every day, you know. He was a magicier, and you know how superstitious sailors are about taking on wizard folk. They think the winds will fail if you're carrying wizard folk abroad. Magicier? Elwich looked surprised. I didn't know that. He was a mender, said the Widow Holloway. Little things. He fixed my glasses for me once when the lens cracked, and I thought I'd have to send away to Constantine to have a new one grind. She smiled at me. Small things, though. Nothing like as good as our Mona here. I flushed. As wizards go, I'm pretty much the bottom of the barrel. Even Master Elwich, who's got just enough magic to take knots out of wooden boards, is better than me. Dough and pastries are about all I can do. The great wizards, the magi, the ones that serve the Duchess, they can throw fireballs around or rip mountains out of the earth, heal the dying, turn lead into gold. Me, I turn flour into yeast, and I can turn flour and yeast into tasty bread on a good day, and occasionally make carnivorous sourdough starters. Still, they were all looking at me expectantly, and I didn't have any food for them, so I felt like I ought to do something. I reached into the case and pulled out one of the day-old gingerbread men. It's early spring, and much too late to still be carrying gingerbread men, but we're the one bakery that stocks a few all year round, just for this purpose. I set the gingerbread man on the counter and focused my attention on it. Live, move, up, up, up. The cookie woke up. It stretched its arms and pushed itself up onto its gingerbread feet. Then it bowed to the Widow Holloway and to Miss McGrammer, threw a salute to Elwich and Brutus, and walked along the counter until it came to a clear space. Dance, I ordered it. The gingerbread man began to dance a very respectable hornpipe. Don't ask me where the cookies get the dances they do. This batch had been doing hornpipes. The last batch did waltzes, and the one before that had performed a decidedly lewd little number that had made even Aunt Tabitha blush. A little bit too much spice in those, I think. We had to add a lot of vanilla to settle them down. I don't know how I learned to do it. I don't know how I learned to make cookies dance. Apparently I used to do it when I was very, very young. Aunt Tabitha still loves to tell the story of the time I was 3 and threw a tantrum in the bakery and the entire case of gingerbread men came alive, even the ones that were still in the oven. They started hammering on the door to be let out, and the already baked ones ran through the store, giggling like little maniacs. They got into the mouse holes, she always says. It took us months to see the end of the little devils. That's when I knew our Mona was going to be a baker. Depending on how much she's got into the kitchen sherry at that point, I get either an affectionate glance or a flowery pat on the back. During rum cake season, there is hugging. Being a wizard is almost all like that. You don't know what you can do until you actually do it, and then sometimes you aren't sure what you just did. There aren't teachers who can help you. Everybody's different. There's usually only a couple dozen magic folk in any given city anyway. A few hundred if it's a really big one. Maybe in the army the war wizards get special training, but down here it's all trial and error and a lot of wasted bread dough. Anyway, the cookies. For me, it works best with cookies that are mostly people or animal shaped, something to do with sympathetic magic. The parish priest said, 6 loaves of plain bread and, oh, all right, 1 berry scone, but don't tell the abbot. And it had to be something made of dough. The puppeteers who put on the Punch and Judy show in the park, they could make wooden puppets dance, but I could focus on wood until I got a splitting headache and it'd just lie there. Dough is all I can do. It's not a very useful skill. But it is handy on occasion. If I can't get something at the back of a shelf, I can usually get a gingerbread man to climb up there and push it forward until I can grab it. We bake up a new batch once a week. Aunt Tabitha says that if nothing else, it's good advertising. I've heard, well, overheard, wasn't supposed to hear it, that there are some people who won't come into the bakery now that I'm here. I don't know if dancing gingerbread bothers them, or if it's the notion of a magicka baking their bread. I think Aunt Tabitha lost a couple of regulars when I started working. She's never said anything about it. I figure, if they'll let a little thing like that bother them, they deserve to miss out on the best sourdough in the city. Anyway, the gingerbread man finished his hornpipe and bowed to his audience, who applauded. Even Miss McGrammer, unbent enough to smile, and she's one of those people who watches magic folk like they're about to run mad or explode into a shower of frogs. The cookie blew a kiss to the widow Holloway, who giggled as if she were a much younger woman, and then marched back to his bin. Thank you, I told it. That's enough for now. It saluted me. This batch was rather military, now that I think of it. Maybe we went heavy on the cardamom, and went back to being an ordinary cookie. Very nice, said Master Elwich. It's not much, I said, embarrassed. Better than I can do, he said, and winked at me. I know he's another magicka, but I've never seen him do anything but straighten bent wood. Still, that's got to be more useful than making cookies dance. When everyone had been shooed out of the shop, which took a while in the case of Miss McGrammer, I went back into the kitchen, just in time to be accused of murder. And we will leave it there for tonight. Isn't that lovely?
That's kind of the reaction I was hoping for.
No!
No, that's just the first 2 chapters. This is a novella, so it's about 40 to 50,000 words. It's a short novel. I'm on chapter 9. There's 32 chapters, and I don't have to go to bed tonight, right? I may be finishing it quite quickly as a result.
So we're doing this for this month, and maybe a little bit of next month as well. And yeah, I love it. It's really, really good.
Apparently somebody's drawing a picture of you doing finger guns, Topaz, but they hadn't made it down already.
Yes.
Exactly. It's wonderful, and it is very much in Ursula's voice. And if you've ever met or seen Ursula, in fact, we should include a link to Ursula's Hugo speech.
It's in the Twitter thread.
Yeah, we told the Sunday stream folks about this.
Yes, more next week.
Tell everybody here about Ursula's speech.
2 things real quick. Firstly, this is a serial. We'll be doing it every week till it's done. And there'll probably be a bit more than 2 chapters next week. And secondly, yeah, Ursula has won a lot of Hugos. And one year, her acceptance speech, and the folks on the Sunday stream will actually know about this already, was a discussion of whalefall. And whalefall is this beautiful event. When a whale dies, it sinks. And what happens is it becomes an ecology. Everything that was the whale's corporeal form is eaten and consumed. And animals come from hundreds of miles away to eat it. And it becomes this oasis on the floor of the ocean. And it is simultaneously one of those kind of front-loading pieces of the cycle of mortality, which sometimes kind of hits me right in the place where I don't like to be hit. And also really beautiful and inspiring. And because Ursula is Ursula, when she won a Hugo, her first thought was, I'm going to talk about whalefall. And I believe she actually won another one for that speech. She was nominated for the speech.
As well. It's called An Unexpected Honor by Ursula Vernon. That's correct. And it's lovely. And the reason we tell that is if you've ever seen Ursula speak or hang out with her, she speaks and thinks
like this.
Exactly in a way that she writes. And it is a huge compliment, Jax, that you think this was me. I would love to be able to write a 10th this well.
To give you an idea of just how metal Ursula and Kevin are, that San Jose Award ceremony I told you about, everyone else is kind of dressed to the nines. I'm in the full kilt and jacket. And we're all like, okay, this is going to be really uncomfortable for 90 minutes. But Piccaccio said it's just going to be 90 minutes, so we can do this. So say we all. And Ursula and Kevin come in late. And I actually hear, Alistair, yeah, can we sit with you? I'm like, yes, of course. They come in, they are dressed in their street clothes.
And
with hot dogs. Fully loaded hot dogs.
They brought hot dogs off the street.
They had literally, Ursula had waited at the front door and went, Kevin, yeah, we're not going to eat for like 4 hours. And he was like, I'm on it. It should also be noted that Kevin has a Mission Adaptable kilt. We first bonded over being the only two men in the room wearing a kilt. Mine is very traditional. Kevin's had a Triceratops on the sporran. Like he had hunted and taken the head of a stuffed one and attached it to the sporran. Yeah.
Kevin's awesome. Kevin is a biker Disney princess.
He is the Sons of Anarchy Disney princess every single way,
Okay, so we'll have to put some kilt photos. I think I have some photos of you and Kevin in kilts. I can dig those out.
Cool. Fine. You know what it sounds like it might be time for?
I have a theory.
Sounds like it might be time for shenanigans. Da 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 da.
Someone in our Discord is drawing John and Martin versus Elias and Peter playing pool chicken. Oh, yes.
Oh, is this for Beach Day?
Is it for the Beach Day thing? I saw something about TMA Beach Day. Yeah, I pointed that at you in case you had a thought about something that you wanted to do.
I may have a thought. There may be a thought forming.
There may be a thought forming.
Yes.
Uh-oh. All right. So, give us some context for this.
So, this is by Petrichor and Chocolate.
This is a tumbler.
It is a tumbler, and it is supposedly a post from r/legal advice. Posted by one U/E Bouchard 2 months ago.
And this was a special request from our calligrapher who is not here this evening because they're doing their own stream. So it's okay. There's the VOD.
My husband has embarrassed me at the annual Institute holiday party for the last time. I want another divorce. My husband, soon to be ex-husband, if all goes as planned, was leering at an archival assistant the other day. He also had a bit too much to drink and started talking about various personal activities that I would have preferred remain undisclosed. Now, I have divorced him before, but this time he seems fit to antagonize me and not sign the papers. Not just that, but he has disappeared, which isn't uncommon, but is still frustrating when I am trying to divorce him. He always gets in a hissy fit when I divorce him. This time, he's just being petty. Is there a way to divorce him without needing to track him down in order to have him sign the papers? He's the captain of a ship, and when he gets petulant, he often sails for a few months before returning to his moorhouse. During these times, it is notoriously hard to contact him, much less find him. Teal dear, my husband ran away in an attempt to be petty, and now I can't divorce him. What do I do? Edit. Please stop making remarks on the healthiness of our relationship. It's none of your business, and we are perfectly fine. Edit. We got divorced again since I made the first post. Edit. We are now remarried again.
Sorry.
Crawbed008, 3.1k points, 2 weeks ago. He always gets in a hissy fit when I divorce him, but this time he's just being petty. Wait, what do you mean by always? E. Bouchard, 2 weeks ago. Whenever I try to divorce him, he acts petulant. Size Nork, 2 weeks ago. Do you divorce him often, LMAO? E. Bouchard, 2 weeks ago. Yes. Get Some, 1 week ago. OP, how many times have you gotten divorced so far? E. Bouchard, 2 weeks ago. 6, though there were a few we didn't go through on. Legally. Cockabora 2 weeks ago. 6? Good God, OP, why do you even keep remarrying? E. Bouchard, 2 weeks ago. Money. Stonks, 2 weeks ago. I know OP in real life, and the real reason is they're the only people willing to put up with each other. Our relationship advice, posted by you. You want me to do all of it?
Yes, keep going.
Big Boy Man, 1 month ago. I, 48, feel like my husband is very clingy, and I'm a person who needs solitude to survive. What should I do? Hello. My husband is always talking to me. I just want to be left alone, but he keeps on scheming. He's always ranting about hiding tapes and the Watcher's crown, and it is getting tedious listening to his, well, words in general. How should I ask for more space? Poor and tired but YOLO, 2 weeks ago. I have a clingy partner too, and what I do is set clear boundaries. I also make sure to set time towards my partner outside of those times when I'm alone, like having dinner every night and having movie games night once a week. Big Boy Man, 2 weeks ago. I interact with him far less already than I would if I did that. Asuna-chan, 2 weeks ago. How much do you talk to him? Big Boy Man, 2 weeks ago. At least once every 3 weeks. Asuna-chan, 2 weeks ago. And you're married? Big Boy Man, 2 weeks ago. I know, it's a lot. You can see why I can't stand him being so clingy. Tanya 9, 2 weeks ago. From reading the replies, I can only assume you hate your husband. Big Boy Man, 2 weeks ago. Despise, actually. Pasta sauce and spaghetti, 1 month ago. I don't know how OP could possibly salvage this relationship if they hate each other and only talk every 3 weeks. Big Boy Man, 1 week ago. The wedding is in 4 days. Alice Carter, 1 week ago. I thought you were already married? Big Boy Man, 1 week ago. Oh, we got divorced about a week after I made the post, and then he proposed again a week after that. Our Petty Revenge. Posted by user Not Johnny DeVille 3 weeks ago. This is where I'm going to fall down. I had my archival assistant spit in his tea. My boss is a huge bastard. He's just awful. He always looks like you're amusing him, but in that kind of way where he's looking at you like you're a meal. He is just a horrible human being. Hell, I wouldn't be surprised if he killed someone. That's the kind of person he is. Anyway, I usually try to keep a professional relationship with my assistants, but a few nights ago they invited me to go out for drinks with them, and my friend blackmailed me into it. We got hammered. It was a truly special experience. Ever since then, I've been on better terms with them. We even have a group chat. The situation goes like this. He's been ranting to me for the last hour about things I already know in that pompous, annoying voice of his. Anyway, I texted one of my assistants, I'll call him M, and M comes in mid-rant and I very sternly ask, why haven't you made our boss's name, I'll refer to him as E, T yet? I kind of put him on the spot and he just stayed there with his jaw dropped. I told him to go make E a cup of tea, so he scurries out, and I wait about 30 seconds and then discreetly text the group chat. Spit in his tea, M. Anyway, they go absolutely ballistic. And T, another of my assistants, sprints halfway across the building. I heard later he even knocked into our secretary, just in time to spit in E's tea too. My last assistant is a bit wearier, but she also does it. M comes back with the tea and hands it to E before quickly leaving. A few minutes pass, and E still hasn't touched his tea. So I remind him that M makes very good tea, and he'll be disappointed if E didn't drink it. There is a quiet battle of wills. Now, I don't know how to put this without sounding insane, but our boss, he just knows things. He's psychic, or something like that. There's absolutely no way he didn't know the tea was messed with. He knows. He knows I know, and we silently stare at each other without moving. Finally, still making direct eye contact with me, he takes a sip of his tea and purses his lips. I ask him if he isn't thirsty. He says he isn't and leaves the room. I never did find out what happened to that tea. Teal dear, I got my archival assistants to spit in my arsehole boss's tea. It was curious. It was glorious. Leave me alone. 2 weeks ago. Holy shit, OP. Did you ever get in trouble? Not Johnny DeVille 2 weeks ago. He didn't have any evidence, so no. Maya Hurst 331 1 week ago. Did he ever try to get revenge? Not Johnny DeVille. He framed me for murder, but I'm still not sure if that was directly related.
Yeah, the tea went to artifact storage. It's the only one.
Oh, that was a good one.
I like that one. That one was very fun.
I especially like the. How often do you talk? Every 3 weeks.
He's so clingy.
Sounds like you hate him. Despise, actually. So good. Thank you, folks, for listening. That was an absolute blast, and yeah, I'm always up for this stuff. So I think it may be time to transition across back to
stuff and the things.
The Big Boy Cam.
It's actually called that in OBS.
It's called the Big Boy Camera. There's also the Big Boy Monologues. Thank you so much for listening. This has been an absolute blast, and isn't this a lovely, lovely story? We will be back on Sunday morning when we will be streaming something new.
We haven't picked yet.
We haven't picked yet. It's either going to be Abzu, which is science fiction diving with slightly different feels, or we were looking at something else that we completely forgot, weren't we?
There was another thing, but I can't remember what it is now.
But we will be streaming, and you can, and do please come and say hi. That will be from about 10 to about 12, and then we'll be back here next Wednesday for more of a Wizard's Guide to Defensive Baking. And this is going to be the point in the chat where I tell you that there are really interesting other things in the works which I can't tell you about yet, but oh boy, you'll know them when you see them.
And you know, they're Rusty Quill fans, so they probably read those weekly little updates that come out and might have some idea.
So right now, if you're going 2 + 2 = yes, then yes. Jolly good. Great. Have an excellent night, folks, or an excellent day wherever you are, and we will see you next week.